Hello everyone and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hack Show. I'm your host Matthew Head, and in this episode I'm talking to Caragh McMurtry. She is the founder of Neurodiverse Sport, which they promote the wider understanding of neurodiversity in sport and advocate for neurodivergent athletes. She's a former Olympic rower, competing in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics for Team GB in the women's 8. She has also won multiple World Cups and championships. I will put links to Neurodiverse Sport and Caragh's Olympic profile in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, Caragh.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
No problem at all. Now, I think a good place to start this conversation would be, where did your love of rowing come from? Seeing as that was the early part of your sort of teen and adult life, I suppose.
Yeah. So I started rowing through an outreach project called Project Awesome. Spelt like an oar, yes.
Oh,
cheesy,
right.
but yeah, exactly.
So they were modest and full of puns, right?
Yeah. And so they came to my state school, Bitton Park in Southampton. So I was just a very average state school kid, probably went to all the after school clubs, all the sports after school clubs, because I guess I had a lot of energy and enthusiasm, but I wasn't particularly loud. I just always wanted to be doing something. And they came to our school and offered rowing as a sort of after school activity for a little bit. And I did that among other things. And then, they invited us down to the local rowing club. And I thought that sounded like a really great idea because it's just more interesting things to do outdoors. And I was always looking for something interesting to do. And actually, fortunately for me, so my walk to school was really long. Now I look back at it, it was like about an hour, but
What?
I'd usually do it in about 45 minutes because I was perpetually late and I'd be like sprinting to school. But the rowing club was only like a 10-minute walk from my house over the river, basically. So I think that really helped things. It meant that from the start, I could just get on with it. And it was like my thing.
Yeah.
And I did like it straight away, but I wasn't completely invested because I was still trying other things. And to be honest, I took a period to kind of just mess around as a young teenager.
Yeah.
But I'd say once I was like in year 9 or 10, I went back and really got stuck into it properly.
Okay.
And just kind of slipped into taking it more seriously. I think because I was naturally quite strong and fit, because I'd always been like running around and doing sports and stuff, like I'd get roped into racing in every crew, especially for like the senior women.
Okay.
And I think it was probably just a steady sort of, I think the key was at the start, I really, really enjoyed the club atmosphere and the people and being outside and being on the water and the sort of routine and the independence. And then later down the line is where the sort of, I could be better at this, and the discipline and the honing kind of came in. But at the start, it afforded me a lot that is kind of separate to the competitive element.
Okay, yes, because I was sort of listening to how you described getting into it, and it's like you didn't sound like this mega competitive person. You just realised they had talent for rowing.
No, I wasn't at all. I really loved it, and it was very much a self-motivated, kind of driven journey.
Okay. And of course, you're neurodiverse yourself. But how did you find school? Apart from the 45-minute walk versus the 10-minute walk to the rowing club, was the rowing club also an escape from that?
Yeah, so I've always said that for me, sport was a way for me to communicate without using my words. And it's funny because people see me and they hear me and they're like, well, you're very articulate.
Yeah.
And they don't realizing like the processing that goes on behind the scenes and the difficulty still and the emotional expression. I find it very hard to process and express my emotions when I'm using my words.
Okay.
And actually like physical activity and sport allows me to do that. And I'm very much of the mind of kind of don't just say. So for me, I'm like, I much prefer to explain myself by just doing it and then having people see the sort of, in retrospect, the method in the madness. And I found that, you know, I could do that when I was younger in sport because people just left me to my own devices. But then as I kind of rose through the ranks, people wanted to control my process a lot more. And that really wasn't good for me. They'd always say, trust the process. And I'd always think, but my process is different to yours. Yeah, I think now, this last year where I've been kind of, I founded and set up my own business and I'm the director, I could delegate more, but I'm actually worried about people, excuse the pun, sticking their oar in.
But I bet you have a few of them. I'll keep count.
Before I've had a chance to like show that what I'm doing is going to work. So I think because I am quite divergent and the way that I do things, you wouldn't necessarily be taught to do it that way or think to do it that way, or it's not something that a lot of people would understand. It means that if I ever kind of try to collaborate with people who don't get it, they're often like, no, you can't do that. You shouldn't do that. You blah, blah, blah. And it's really off-putting. And I found that in sport when it got to the high levels. And now I'm just like, right, I'm just doing it my own way and you will see. Like, you'll see in the end. And so that's quite a relief.
But it's interesting because in sport, obviously as a rower, you're rowing in a team where all of you have to work together. So how did you get the team cohesion as well as being able to train in your own sort of style? Because there must be a way that, like, you know, you're in a women's eight at Olympics, so that's 8 people on a boat that you've got to kind of click with.
It didn't always work at all.
Okay.
And it didn't work at the Olympics, to be honest. But I mean, I'm not going to put that all down to me. Like the World Cup, the World Cup leading to the Olympics, I got to sub into the women's 4 and we won a silver medal. So like I can absolutely click in certain crews. I think the key is it takes a very good coach to give people what they need and manage people and be the kind of conduit for communication. And a coxswain if you've got 8 people. And obviously there's also a difference between doing something differently but still being able to collaborate and then just being contrary, a handbrake, behaving badly. Like I think they're often conflated and they're very different things.
Yeah. I think you're right. And it's an interesting kind of coaching call, isn't it? That you could have yourself is autistic, but you could have somebody who's dyslexic, somebody neurotypical, and somebody with something else going on, all on the same team of a boat of 8 people, because the probabilities across the population would work. Now, how as a coach do you manage to get all them people to work together and to work together at a high enough level to win Olympic medals? That's a tricky thing to get everything to work. And clearly, not all the time it didn't necessarily happen.
Yeah.
But one thing I thought was really interesting, I was reading some of your profile on your website. You got misdiagnosed as having bipolar rather than autism. Now, how did that come about? And what was sort of the process through all that?
I guess, yeah. So as I alluded to, when I, started to get better at my sport, people started to take notice. They wanted to help, but they also wanted to control. And I think that didn't work for me because they weren't seeing me through a neurodivergent informed lens.
Yeah.
I knew I was different. I always knew I was different because I connected to a degree, but there was always sort of a feeling of dissonance. And the way I saw things and the way I processed things, it didn't sound like the way other people described it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so once I got on the team and I was getting a lot of advice and just treatment coaching through that like neurotypical lens, and it's very intense, obviously. You're almost under a microscope all the time. I felt more and more like I was having to shape shift and do kind of mental gymnastics, and it's really exhausting.
Yes. Yeah.
Like almost having to translate everything into your own language to watch what you say and how you say it, and to have everything that makes you thrive taken away, and any kind of suggestion that you have shut down. And I think it really impacted my mental health.
Yeah.
I did have big periods of depression, and because I'm a very determined person and I'm a problem solver, and I think I am quite optimistic underneath, I'd always kind of pull myself out of it, regroup,
right. Okay. Yeah.
try again, inevitably fail because my needs weren't being met in any way, shape or form. And then that's what looks like a mood disorder. It looks like the fluctuations of a mood disorder. So when I look back, I don't actually blame anyone because no one knew. I guess looking forwards, what I try to advocate for and what I would hope is the direction that people go in is to define mental health from neurodivergence, and to define what is a symptom as such. That's a dog. What's a symptom of, a temporary state of poor mental health, and what's the actual cause?
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you don't, yes, sometimes you have to kind of give first aid to a mental health crisis. That's true.
Yeah.
But if you don't then try and uncover the layers below, you're never going to address and solve the actual problems. For me, the problem was the cognitive dissonance of consistently trying to work in a way that was never going to work for my unique neurology and behavior traits. And that's what needed to change. I didn't need to take, I don't know how many tablets I was taking a day, 7. I didn't need to take 1,400 milligrams of lithium and 150 milligrams of lamotrigine and 25 milligrams of quetiapine every day.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of drugs. And as you're an Olympic level athlete, you've been drug tested. So I guess you've got to kind of navigate that on top of it.
Well, no, because they're definitely not banned, because they are not, I can tell you now, they are not performance enhancing.
Yeah.
They're like, do you want to be sedated? Fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm so kind of thinking of drug testing in sport, but it's a bit of a dark question for me, really. But yeah.
No, because it's fair, because like where ADHD is concerned, you do have to get a TUE for the medication that you would take.
Yes, because that's going the other way. Yeah. So,
yeah.
No, but that's a lot of stuff taken a day, and it's really interesting, is it? How I've had a couple of guests on with it, missed the neurodiversity and dived into the mental health piece, but it's something. I'm an engineer by trade, so we always do something called root cause analysis. Like something breaks, you don't just fix that thing. You have to dive right into it. What is the very beginning of it? And I wonder why sometimes neurodiversity is not brought up earlier on in the conversation. You know, you're getting prescribed a lot of drugs before getting a neurodiversity assessment.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is neurodivergent conditions weren't really widely talked about 5-10 years ago.
No.
And that's when I got a diagnosis of bipolar was, just less than 10 years ago. I was on the medication for 5 years. And I think, neurodivergence, it was seen in a very binary manner. So you were either heavily disabled by a neurodivergent condition, or you're normal and you have bad mental health, and therefore you're abnormal. And those were the categories. And then now I think we're starting to realize that actually, nobody's normal and nobody's abnormal. And there's a huge spectrum in between. And you can have, a multitude of characteristics that span across different neurodivergent labels. Like there are aspects of my neurology that kind of marry up with ADHD and dyslexia in some ways, but my diagnosis is autism. And I much prefer to see people as a group of characteristics that are unique to them. But yeah, I think and I was talking to someone today about it actually, but I think it probably stems from good intentions.
Yeah.
Trying to get people the help that they need. So you have to kind of slap a label on it a bit in with this medical system that we have.
Yeah.
And, get people labeled so that they can get the help that they need. But that's overly reductive and sometimes limiting. And then now we have the problem where we have a huge backlog and nobody can get a label or any support. So
yeah. How did you manage to eventually realize that it wasn't bipolar? It was because of your autism was why these behaviors manifested?
Yeah, a number of things. So, like I said, it was 5 years down the line and I was getting worse and worse. And it'd taken me about 5 years because I tried every single possible way to make things better. I was like, what if it's this? What if it's this? What if I could do this better? And I have to say, by the end, I wasn't a good athlete still because I was on all that medication. But in terms of the way that I was acting, I was. So, and I still had all that training under my belt and I was like nailing all of the 1%ers, but I just wasn't getting the results because I was kind of being poisoned, or poisoning myself. But 5 years down the line, I was like, I don't see how this is going to work. And I'm literally like so determined. If I decide I'm going to do something, I will do it. And I think from a young age, I was like, I'm going to go to the Olympics. And it took, and I really thought that was going to happen, when I won junior medals and under 23 medals and medals when I first got on the team. And then I started taking this medication and I put on 8 kilos and I was struggling with everything more and more every day. And my hair was falling out and my nails were chipping and my skin was bad.
Yeah.
And I felt like nobody could or would help me. And I was like, I was almost starting to sort of say to myself, like, oh my God, I think you actually might not be able to achieve something you put your mind to. And like, and I say that flippantly now, but that was a huge thing for me at the time. I was like,
imagine.
am I like, I just like, but what was also in my mind was if you let this overcome you, then for the rest of your life, it will be, oh yeah, but it probably won't work out. Oh yeah, but what if? Oh, it just changes the whole tone of,
yes.
No, you can't overcome adversity.
Yeah.
So I think that was what kept me sort of clinging to this last remnants of hope. And I think there was a weird correlation at the time. So I did the indoor rowing championships, and it was the first time it had been it was the first time it had been put on in a certain way in which there was like loud music and a huge room, like big audience and like blaring lights.
Yeah.
And I was sure I was on for a good one. And basically I just completely tanked, but I was very, very aware of the sort of the noise and the lights like drilling into my head.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously in a water sport, you don't have that usually.
You're not sensing
it's very
the crowd or anything.
Yeah, no, you don't really have that. It's very quiet on the course, and the crowd only kind of comes in at the end, and you're already your ears are already ringing, and you can't hear it.
Okay.
It was quite a unique experience, and yeah, almost for the first time, I was like putting two and two together. I was like, I think the environment here like got me. It was usually, it's, you know, part of being neurodivergent for a lot of people, it's difficult to read yourself and read your own emotions, and that's what makes it like hard. Is
yes
that interospection is hard, and you know, I've got alexithymia, which is difficulty kind of expressing your emotions or like identifying them and expressing them, and it had to slap me in the face for me to kind of be like, oh, okay, maybe that is something. And even then I was just crying on my husband's shoulder, and it was almost like a little afterthought that was like, oh, and I struggled with this, but it was in a long list of things that I struggled with. So it still was just, you know, it was kind of like a footnote still.
Yeah.
But he, I think, may have picked up on it. And he had also listened to an interview with somebody on the radio, and she had been diagnosed as autistic and misdiagnosed as bipolar before that. And afterwards he said to me, like, it was like a parallel of your story. So he had that in his mind. And then at the same time, we had a new performance director come in. He said that he had a very person-centered approach, and I believed him. He came across that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I arranged to have a meeting with him and probably the only female coach in the building outside of the training centre at a kind of pub. And it was almost to just say, like, I think I'm going to stop because I can't continue like this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they both were a bit like, just hold one moment and I'll try and do what I can for you, like try and get you help.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess he felt a sense of like moral responsibility, which is very rare in sport.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, usually athletes just, honestly, they just get tossed to the side. I think, yeah, athletes tend to kind of get like broken physically or mentally, and then I wouldn't say the aftercare is amazing.
Yes.
So like, I don't think necessarily that they were thinking, oh, we need to keep this athlete on. Like, we need to invest in this person for the future. I think I was just very lucky to have a new performance director who was just a nice person and kind of thought, we can't leave this person in this state, considering they came onto the team as a junior medalist and an under-23 medalist and then a medalist at senior level. And now like one step away from being sectioned.
Yeah.
I think I'll do what I can. And again, coincidentally, it happened to correspond to when the UK sport mental health panel was being set up. So it was like an athlete mental health panel. I think that's kind of been amalgamated into something else in the last couple of years because I think they got inundated. But I was there. Yeah. I was their first client. I like to say client. And they came to my house and basically triaged. There were like 3 of the top sports psychiatrists and psychologists in the country. And they spoke to the coaches, they spoke to my family and friends, they spoke to me. They I had to get hold of my medical records, which was hard, and was also hard to carry because they were so thick.
Yeah, probably quite extensive at that point.
Yeah, they were very extensive.
Throwing a few injuries to go with it, yeah.
Yeah, I still haven't looked back at them because I'm like terrified of what I might see, but
Okay.
I still have them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I had some sessions with one of the therapists. And then like I think that I had a second appointment, and that's kind of when they talked about the they said it was, at the time they said high functioning autism.
Yes, okay.
But obviously a lot of people don't like to use functioning labels anymore, but it would have been Asperger's, I guess, in the past. And yeah, from then on I got therapy.
Okay.
I guess to sort of partly to deal with the traumatic experiences that I've been through, but also I now see it as to kind of learn the things that I didn't get to learn at school.
Yes.
That I needed to learn as like an autistic person.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I spoke about alexithymia earlier, but we talked a lot about emotions, my emotions. And I think one of the big barriers, at least for me, is, like I said, I kind of struggle to sort of identify and express my emotions, but that means that they're still there and they kind of get stuck, and it feels like they kind of block the way, and they block, like everyone experiences emotions every day, but most people can kind of just they can see them and they can process them. If you can't kind of see them, identify them, express them, then you can't process them. So you have this big build-up of unprocessed emotions. So a lot of the therapy that I had was like figuring out how to identify my emotions and process them. And I used mood cards, and it kind of gave me like a language that I didn't have. And I would say I'm like a lot better at it now, but I still sometimes, like my husband's really good working with me, and sometimes I'll kind of be like, I feel something, I don't know what it is. And I know it's not a good thing.
Okay.
And then we'll talk. And then when I hit on it, I'm like, that's what it is. And then it feels better.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like a sort of semi-blindness is how I would describe it. But yeah, so I think that was a huge help, was that. And then just feeling like I had some kind of advocacy, like someone didn't think I was insane.
Yes.
And someone was prepared to sort of talk to the coaches on my behalf, because before that it had always been me. There were never any support staff that understood me, so they couldn't speak on my behalf. And I mean, half of them were scared of the coaches as well.
Okay.
And like, yeah, I'd always had to explain myself and advocate for myself, even when I wasn't in a good place.
Yeah.
And that really ground me down over the years. So having somebody to advocate for me was like a massive relief. That made me feel much more psychologically safe, I would say. And I'd caveat that with a lot of the time in sport, I think people wanted to see mental toughness.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think personally, I was seen as really tough in the early days. Like, I think people who knew me kind of, and still know me, know how tough I am, in air quotes.
Yes. Yeah.
But when you're put under like unreasonable amounts of stress, pressure, adversity, more than anyone else, and you kind of show signs of wobbling, people kind of point at you and say, oh, not cut out for it, not strong enough. And I think neurodivergent people tend to get labelled as, you know, they've lost it, or they used to be good and they're not anymore, or they're emotional, or they're just not strong enough. And actually, I'd like to see how, you know, those people would fare if they were put in situations in which they could never fully express themselves or have their needs met or, you know, decompress at any point. I think it's a very, very natural and expected reaction to adverse circumstances. And yet it's seen as a weakness because the context isn't understood.
I think you're right there. And it's a really interesting point you make that, you know, professional sport and Olympic level sports, by the sound of it, quite a grueling world anyway. And you need a lot of determination, grit and stuff to get to the level that gets you to the Olympic Games. And you're right, with the extra pressure of neurodiversity thrown in there and misdiagnosed neurodiversity as well. So that's an extra layer over the top of maybe some of your other competitors within the team that are quote unquote neurotypical. You're not even starting at the same point at that point, are you? You're having to deal with this extra thing, which is really interesting that you still managed to make the Olympic Games. So there's something driving you even with all of this adversity beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, and this is not to sound big-headed. Like there are a lot, firstly, there are a lot of people who could be incredible athletes and they're not because they're not given a chance. Yes. So you're going to have people from diverse backgrounds, from, you know, poorer backgrounds, with, you know, there's so many intersectional barriers that get in the way of a lot of potentially amazing athletes succeeding. And for me, neurodivergence and a lack of understanding almost got in the way, and it got in the way of me probably being the best I could be. I was a state school kid, the only state school kid to go to the Junior World Championships when I did, and I got a silver medal. Yeah. The same at under 23s. So, you know, when I'm at my best and I have my needs met and I'm able to express myself in the way that's best for me, I know I'm very, very good because my hyper focus is second to none. You tell me to do something and I will do it. Yes. And I'll do it really, really, really well. Yeah. What I need is time to decompress. I need things explained to me very explicitly. I need to repeat them back. I need to be able to collaborate and contribute. I need to be able to ask questions because I'm a bottom-up thinker. Mm-hmm. But I'm incredibly driven. Like I said, hyper-focus, attention to detail, a natural capacity to row well and be strong, luckily. Yeah. But I think, you know, a lot of what should make a good athlete, in my opinion, is your ability to problem solve and to innovate. And when you're in an environment in which you're able to do that, some sports foster this well, you will see really phenomenal progression. When you're in an environment in which everyone just has to be a carbon copy of each other, and that's how that sport tries to make, you know, progress and succeed, I think the results will be fewer and further between. Yeah. And the progress will not be as steep. And unfortunately, I would say rowing is one of those. And again, this is diverging a little bit from our point, but like I said, there will be a lot. I'm very realistic in that there will be a lot of people out there who could be fantastic athletes. But at the moment, I could tell you from day dot, like, who will succeed and who won't. And it comes down to something as arbitrary as if you're good looking or not, if you have blonde hair or brown hair, if you have a way with words and you're prepared to flirt,
right.
If you are a social butterfly and you fit in and you fit the mold, if you're very coachable, if your values align with the culture at wherever you are. So, and that sounds really pessimistic. It's not pessimistic. It literally is just realistic. It's just the way it is at the moment in some sports.
In some sports.
In some sports.
And would the gender divide in some sports make a difference on that?
I think you can get away with more as a man.
Okay.
I would say. Like I've said this before, but I was told if you were a male athlete, your bluntness and your bluntness would be seen as passion.
Yes.
But you're not. You're on the women's team, so you need to sugarcoat what you say. So I think that you'll probably see more neurodivergent male athletes or openly neurodivergent male athletes because the neurodivergent traits that make you strong, your ruthless efficiency, for instance, are seen as good male traits, and they're seen as very bad female traits, regardless of whether you're an athlete or not.
Yes, I can see that. As you say, the ruthlessness and the bluntness, and yes, and I'm thinking of athletes off the top of my head who I know are dyslexic, and most of them are male. So yeah, okay. I just thought it interesting growing on your point when you were saying about picking from hair color, ability to flirt and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, is that very much a woman's sport thing or is that a general sports thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of, there's things they prefer in the men's team. I wouldn't say no men's team. That makes it sound like I'm thinking of a particular sport, but there's definitely a group of sports. And it tends to be the sports that are fed from like private schools. So, and I think that might be something to do with as well with where the coaches are coming from and how the culture is kind of quite insular.
Yeah, so like an unconscious bias thing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, where I'd like to sort of flip the script on it now is that neurodiversity can be an advantage in different ways. There's always a sort of yin and yang to it. Now, what would your thoughts be on how your neurodiversity has probably assisted you within your sporting career, as well as obviously what we've spoken about on the other side of it with the misdiagnosis and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned it a little bit already, but like the hyperfocus and the ability to just do something repetitively over and over and over again until you get it right, like that attention to detail, the pattern recognition, actually to a degree, my time blindness in that.
Okay.
So I was never late to training. It took inordinate amounts of energy to not be late. I actually ended up being half an hour early every day.
Okay.
But I kind of like lose time sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I get into like a flow state when I'm rowing, for instance, an hour could go by and I've just kind of been like mesmerized. And the same thing happens when I'm like working now. I get stuck into something and then unless I've set a reminder or an alarm, I haven't eaten or drunk anything, which isn't great, but I've also done a lot of work.
Yeah.
So it's like it verges on obsession, but I don't mind the word obsession. No. I'm like, you know what? It can be a good thing.
It
depends on what you're obsessed with.
Yeah, especially if you're a competitor. I've been obsessed with the sport you're doing. It's probably a very helpful thing.
Yeah. I think when I'm in a good place mental health wise.
Yes.
Because it's different when you're in a state of like hypervigilance because you've been anxious for so long. Yeah. Because you've been through some terrible experiences and, logic says that something bad's going to happen again. I'm quite brave. I don't really listen to other people wait, I listen to coaches, but I really don't like naysayers.
Okay. Yes.
I'm just like, but why not? Like, why not? And I think that can be a benefit. It can be a benefit kind of when you're on your own. It can cause some frustrations in a team. Yeah, but then that's a usual kind of personality differences, I think. You know what? Something funny just came to mind. And this is so irrelevant to sport. I mean, it'd be really relevant if I was like an MI5 agent, but I'm not. So I did like a facial recognizer test once, and I came in like the top percentile. So
nice.
I will never forget a face. But there's like really random things like that with neurodivergence. Like I know, so an athlete, Tully Kearney, who's a Paralympian, she's autistic and dyslexic. And she said that she reads better upside down and back to front. And I was like, wow, brains are just so cool, aren't they? Like your brain is kind of like it's like a computer. It's like, you just have to, find ways to access it. But like how, it's like with me in the pattern recognition stuff, like I can, that's a real strength in some situations, but it's finding ways to get around the barriers that are, I wouldn't say that I find that like a lot of barriers are almost like man-made.
Mm-hmm.
So the systems that are in place that everyone has to use kind of work against a lot of neurodivergent people.
I think so. I had a great analogy, and I wish I thought of this, is that everybody's taught as if they're a PC, but maybe you're actually a Mac. So trying to use a Mac like a PC, it doesn't really, it can kind of do it, but it's not what it's there for.
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah. I wish I thought of it.
That's so good. Yeah, that's so true. And like some computers will just like not be able to do it at all. Like computer says, no, I have to do it my way. And some will be able to just about stretch, but...
Yeah, or masquerade as a PC.
Masquerade,
Yeah.
But like the processing that's going on behind the scenes is just like burning the chip out.
Yes, yeah. You can look at what the process is doing. It's up. Why is it working so hard? Because it's having to pre-edit everything before it comes out. Yes. And guilty of doing that as well. But that's really interesting. And I think that goes back to your point with how your experience with the coaching stuff. If you've got a sport that wants 8 people in a boat, that are effectively 8 people who are the same, but you're not getting the best out of each individual. So you want to optimize the individual, and then optimize how they work together as a team would be probably a more...
a balanced approach.
That's what I'm trying to say.
It's like, I get really frustrated when... I used to get really frustrated in sport when it's like, oh, we can't do that, so we have to do this. And it's like, well, have you thought about the grayscale? Like, I'm supposed to be the autistic one who's like really binary. But
well, surely the ultimate goal is always to bring home more medals. So
But then that's people believe that, the way that it's always been done is the way that it always should be done.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, if it ain't broke, but maybe it is. Yeah.
But and another strength I would say in what I'm doing now, but not necessarily as an athlete, is that I'm incredibly empathetic.
Okay.
Which I think a lot of people don't realize that as an autistic person, you can be empathetic. But when I was speaking to like a research professor who specializes in autism, he described it as like a broken thermostat. So it's like hard to regulate your empathy. So you might be like overly empathetic in some situations and not empathetic enough in others. But again, that's possibly people just looking at what they perceive. And like when they, traditionally people have talked about autism as being a lack of empathy, I would question that as well. I'm like, was it ever a lack of empathy, or was it a lack of connection and understanding and ability to communicate on the same wavelength? Was that people interpreting? And was that people interpreting what they saw to be a lack of empathy, and that's not actually what it was?
Again, it goes back to that root cause thing, doesn't it? What is the root cause?
I think there are like a couple of things that are definite about autism and neurodivergence, and one is the sensory differences.
Yes, yeah.
And the other is the processing and learning differences.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as much as the other kind of things might be a symptom or something you see, like I think a lot of the root causes will boil down to those two things.
And it's quoted quite a lot with the dyslexia one. No two dyslexics the same. We all have different childhood experiences and different ways of growing up, and how that has shaped our life, as well as our neurodiversity, that it's never the same. I can't walk past people in the street like, you're a dyslexic person.
Yeah.
But there's a lot it's quite complicated what's going on, isn't it? And trying to fit people in boxes is hard work. But as you alluded to earlier, sometimes you need that for our sort of Western medical system to work.
Yeah.
So I do want to get on to neurodiverse sport. Now, I think I know why you set it all up, but you retired as a rower. I'm pretty certain by this point why you set it up. So you retired as a rower. What sort of triggered you to actually go, I'm just going to go fully into this and embrace it and set a company up? And
so last year I did a level 2 start your own business course.
Oh, nice.
I used some of my APA to do that. And then I was like, you know what? I've done a level 2 college course. I think I could start my own business now.
Yeah.
That is typical sort of autistic ADHD thinking there. But also a testament to neurodivergent strength in that, you set your mind to something very process driven, step by step, like ruthlessly efficient. And it kind of, I just literally just step by step, obviously a few burnouts and meltdowns along the way.
Of course.
Because it's never easy for me to like learn new things. But I think, what would I say the key parts to it have been? I think it's important for people to know that when I started, I thought, should I fade away into the background? Should I fade away into obscurity? I don't want to look like a bitter, twisted athlete with an axe to grind.
Yeah. And
also I'm tired. I was really tired because I'd gone straight from 5 years on, lithium, lamotrigine, quetiapine, to then trying to catch up while still being in the black book, trying to make it to the Olympics, and then COVID on top of that and the delayed Olympics. And I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And I also finished rowing with, again, this is another frustrating thing about being autistic and people not understanding that you might struggle to express yourself. But I had quite a big series of injuries, like missed. So I had like a ruptured disc, psoas tendonitis, glute med tendonitis, a cam and a pincer and a tear in my hip, and capsulitis that was quite bad in my hip. But I was just plugging on.
Sorry, the ruptured disc would slow me down initially, let alone all the other stuff on top.
Yeah. It's quite common for rowers to just grind their body into dust.
Yeah.
But it complicates things when you can't express your pain very well.
Right, okay.
And when people don't understand that, so you just look hesitant and they kind of just chalk it down to nerves or something.
Okay.
But anyway, that was a digression. So
Very interesting one.
An interesting one, yeah. But my point was that I was really tired and my confidence was still quite low. And I didn't feel like it's been so long since I'd done anything extracurricular. Because while I was an athlete, all of my energy was going into just, like I said, doing the mental gymnastics. I'd get home and I was exhausted, and I'd almost everything in my life I'd pared back in order to just get that thing done.
Yes, yeah.
Or just to get through that part of my life. I wanted to keep doing that, and everything else was being sacrificed more and more and more. And yeah, I stopped, and I didn't feel like I had much at all.
Yeah.
Of anything. And I think what had happened was I knew I wanted to help people through sport. And like I said, my CV was there was nothing interesting on it at all, apart from the rowing career.
I was going to say, hang on.
People aren't going to hire you on that. Like,
I suppose so, yeah, when you put it like that.
Well, unless you like go and work in recruitment or something, or I don't mean recruitment's like they take anyone. I mean there are recruitment drives for athletes to go into recruitment, basically.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And to work in banking and certain.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Certain organizations. So they'll kind of take you with just being an athlete on your profile, because I think they realize the strengths, but most organizations don't. They require specific knowledge. And
yes, yeah.
Like I said, I wanted to work in sport for good, and I started to sort of make some phone calls and send some emails and then have some video calls of people. And I almost felt the reason that I sort of touched upon and then started talking to people about my story at first was because it was almost like an explanation. I was like, but this is why there's nothing beyond the sport. Like, this is why I can't come to you with all these qualifications. I've got a university qualification from a long time ago, but it's not relevant to anything. It's actually archaeology.
Oh, okay.
But so yeah, me telling my story was literally just like, please hear me out, because like this is the explanation. And then people were kind of like quite shocked at my story and like wanted to know more. And I was, and it kind of like, I kind of like hopped a bit from there, from person to person. And I ended up talking to someone called Jack Dyer-Harge. I don't know how to say his name, but he is the CEO of Neuropol, which is a neurodivergent recruitment agency.
Oh, okay.
And he like said to me, you need to do something with your story. Like, you need to set up a business yourself. Like, you can do it. And it's weird. I haven't really spoken to him much since. I had a few sort of like mentoring sessions with him that were really useful. But I think we're both very busy people. But I will never forget the fact that he kind of like pushed the snowball off the cliff or off the mountain. Like, words and genuine investment and someone genuinely believing in you. I don't mean financial investment.
No.
I mean investment of, what would you say?
No, investment of time.
Investment of time and benefit of the doubt, I think.
Yeah.
An investment of respect. Those things have a massive impact, especially when you haven't had them for a long time. And so I was literally like a dog with a bone. I was like, oh my God, someone believes in me. Like someone thinks that my story is powerful and that I should do something with it. And all it takes is literally, I'm like a Labrador. It takes one person I genuinely believes means it to say, you can do this, and I'll do it. Like, I had that with my first coach at Cole Porter's, Nick Germani. He was so like gutsy, and he worked at the docks, and he would always be like, go on, girl, you could do it. And that's all I needed. And then I, got myself to the junior world. And it was the same this time round. Like, I just needed someone to say, you can do this. And kind of from there, it was very piecemeal, like not setting huge expectations for myself. Always, always, always coming back to what am I doing this for? So if I ever get overwhelmed, which I do, because it's all new to me, and you know, I am a perfectionist, and I do have slight control issues, and lots of different things that I struggle with. I won't go into them too much, but all the other autistic people will know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so whenever I feel really overwhelmed, well, firstly, nothing can be as hard as being on lithium and being on the national team. So I'm like, pull your socks up.
And rowing the boat with ruptured discs and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah.
But secondly, I just think, Caragh, why are you doing this? You're doing this because when you were in sport, you hoped, you really, really needed somebody to look at you and see you and help you, and you didn't get that. And you looked around and you saw so many talented people not getting that either. And you looked beyond sport and elite sport, and you see the patterns in the world in which people continue to be excluded from school, be excluded from sport, be excluded from work, you know, in this vicious familial cycle. And I really believe a lot of it is connected to neurodivergence. And I don't think that people are not capable of rising out of this. But I think, like I said, the system's set up so people can't. And I personally think that sport is a free, or usually, or can be free way, you know, if you go for a run, for instance, of self-managing enough that you can see the wood through the trees, and you can see how to get out of the situation that you're in and how to improve your life. And like, I'm determined to help as many neurodivergent people access sport as possible. And I've not seen it being done in a way that's going to be effective yet. I've not seen it in any organization that have sport initiatives, sport for good initiatives. None of the neurodiversity charities kind of are really interested in sport at the moment. And I think I know how to make it happen. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people. And so when it gets overwhelming, I'm like, just think of the people that you're helping. They're just people like you. And then I think, oh yeah, I just want to help people. I do. Yeah. I just want to help people. And then it all kind of like calms down, because I get overwhelmed by all the tons of information coming. Emails are the worst. Yes. But like just information overload. And because I everything sticks to me, I have to process everything. I can't filter.
Okay.
That's what becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
When I boil it down to just, you know, imagine the people, it's kind of fine. But yeah, I think what people respect and appreciate is just balance and honesty and genuine empathy and understanding. And I'm determined that however big neurodiverse sport grows, it doesn't get commercialized. It retains the people factor. It's led by neurodivergent people, and that it's like really based in reality. And, you know, it's authentic. I don't ever want it to become kind of like, you know, an American advert.
Okay.
I want it to be accessible to like normal people. And even though I do have like Olympians on the blog, I also have like Sunday league football players, because I don't see anyone as better than anyone else. Like, you know, if you're an Olympian and you won a gold medal, but you went to private school and you had really supportive parents who pushed you from the age of 8, and you have all the money and the security in the world, and you're very pretty and you have nothing else to worry about, and you're neurotypical, and you have some great qualifications behind you, like, well done. But at the same time, like, I'm not as impressed as if you had come from I'm not as impressed as if you had come from like a tower block in like East London. And like, at the same time, if you are somebody who is neurodivergent and you have a lot of struggles, and sometimes your anxiety is so great that you can barely get out of bed, but you go for a run for 5 minutes, like,
yeah.
Well, kudos to you. Like, that is amazing. To me, that's I know this sounds a bit upside down, but to me, that is as impressive as that first person winning an Olympic medal. But that's my very autistic brain just sort of.
Makes perfect sense to me. It's one of the reasons this podcast exists, that as a young person, you get your dyslexic role models, your Richard Bransons and that, but they were so far away from me, who Richard Branson was already a millionaire by the age I was at the time. It's like, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't, in my mind, I can't plug it together. But talking to, I've talked to all sorts of people, from lawyers to coaches to accountants to doctors and all over the place. But these are people who do professional jobs, and and it kind of ties it all together. It's nice to have the kind of high level people, but there's also everything else in between. And you seeing, as you say, sometimes somebody with dyslexia who decided they want to be a librarian and chase that career down is amazing, as well as the other dyslexic person who set up £1 million companies.
Yeah.
So I totally get where you're coming from that. So I'm never ever going to be an athlete, but if I was the hypothetical neurodiverse athlete and I've dived on your website, what's sort of the best journey through that?
Yeah. So without revealing my business plan, so like I said, okay, I think people look at neurodiverse sport and they're like, oh, can I speak to a member of your team? And I'm like, my team is growing. I've got some volunteers, but ultimately, like, a lot of it is me. That's partly, as I said, because I have to be involved in everything to understand it. Like, it's like an access and an engagement thing. And it's partly, I guess, a trust and control thing. Like, I'm really keen to get like good people around me rather than people who have all these like fancy like titles and labels and qualifications. Like, I just want genuinely well-meaning people around me. But that being said, it means that neurodiverse sport, the website, the services and everything, I feel like it's almost like I feel like I need to give a pre-apology. I don't know what I'm apologizing for. I want there to be more, but there's still more than nothing. Yes. And it's a place where people can go and learn a little bit about neurodivergence and how it relates to sport. And I think because I understood that because I've got a lot of pots on the boil at the moment. Like, one of them is that I'm starting to do workshops to Olympic teams. Like, I'm all about actually making change. And I've got a focus group going on where we've just had our first meeting with some of the lead sporting inclusion initiatives in the country. That was really good. So I've got all these things on the boil, and I know that I'm not going to be able to keep churning out, huge amounts of resources on the website. It's a website that I also created myself. So I don't know if it's got the capacity for that. But I think from the start, I knew that the best way to teach was through stories, real stories. Yes. And from the start, I knew that I wanted to get the attention off of me because I don't actually like being in the limelight. So I had to like suck it up and have my story out there for a while. I was like, this is horrible. And then as soon as I could, I started to talk to other athletes and write their stories and interview them. And the blog is becoming what I saw it, what I hoped it would be from the start, which is like just a tapestry of human diversity. So you've got people who are Olympians, and you've got people who are grassroots participants, and you've got people who are dyslexic, dyspraxic, have ADHD or autistic, and everything in between, and then some other things as well. And each person gives some other kind of perspective and some kind of tip or trick. And there's starting to be enough people on there that I think whoever you are, you could go on there and find somebody to relate to or learn something. And I've always been keen for the website to be a place where both, I keep saying athletes, but neurodivergent staff as well can go. Neurodivergent people can go and feel a sense of belonging and like they're not crazy and, you know, there's helpful resources for them, but also a place where people who don't know anything about the neurodiversity world, you know, the most hard-headed sports coaches could come and have their heart melted by 1 degree. Like, that's my plan, is like just to learn something. So I'd say the blog is the big bit of that. And, you know, it could be better. It could be, everything could be better. But, you know, at the moment, that's all from me.
It's got to be built. It's got to be built from somewhere, hasn't it?
It's got to be built from somewhere. And like you said about the whole Richard Branson thing, I think sometimes I do have that intrusive thought where I'm like, this is not good enough. I want to rip it all up. Like sometimes I'm like, I'm going to destroy everything. I know that's bad because that's the perfectionist in me, but I'm like, I hate it. I'm going to destroy it all. And then I'm like, Caragh, like, what are you comparing? Like, what is the outcome of what you're doing? It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to help people.
Yes. Yeah, but better is the enemy of good, isn't it? Yeah.
But I think I've been through enough and I've learned enough lessons that I'm almost like perfectly positioned to do this now.
Good.
I think me 10 years ago, no, I was not the master of my own brain at all.
Okay,
I was an emotionally dysregulated mess.
Fair enough. Yes. Yeah, no, great. You've got to this point and you're actually now trying to pay it back into the sport that I suppose got you to places in life as well. So every guest that comes on this podcast gets 3 rapid fire questions from me. They don't need rapid fire answers from you, but they are quick questions for me. I'm going to adapt them a little bit because they normally use the word dyslexia, but we do a bit more broad for you. So my first question is, what prejudices have you had about neurodiversity has been proven wrong?
I genuinely thought I was stupid. So yeah, when I finished rowing, no one said it directly to my face, but from the looks that you get and from the way that you're treated and the way that you're talked to, I really, really think people thought I was thick, and it made me think I was too.
Yeah.
I hate that word thick. I don't know why I just said that. And I realized, you know, how having people believe in me and push me to move outside of my comfort zone and to learn new things and to really just find out what autism meant to me and also what neurodivergence means to other people. It's really opened my eyes. And firstly, may I say, if you are intellectually impaired, that is okay, and it doesn't make you any less of a person. But I think I'm using the word stupid and thick, and I think that people might conflate that with intelligence. And I think what I'm trying to get at more is capability. Like I was made to feel incapable, and actually I'm quite capable in my own way.
Yes.
Like I'm incapable in your way, but I'm very capable in my own way. That's a better way to say it. And I also don't mind if you keep the unedited, the other bit in, because I think it's good to show balance and that not everyone gets things right when they talk. And
definitely. And as you were coming around to as you thought it out verbally, I thought that was really good. You verbally worked through the idea.
Yeah.
As you say, it's really good to show, you know, people are people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an answer that one that comes up quite a lot. And actually your way of putting it about the capabilities is really an interesting way of doing it. It's that, yes, you're capable, but just maybe not in this sort of narrow way. Okay. So next in this rapid fire set is that if an alien landed and you had to describe neurodiversity to them, how would you do it?
Everyone's differing behavior traits, neurology. I would probably, though, describe it in actions and pictures, because I think they're more likely to understand what they see rather than a language that they hear.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'd like point at my head and point at other people and just like maybe I'd put a load of pebbles on the floor and then point at my head and then point at someone's else, head and say that they're like that pebble and I'm like that pebble. Probably. Maybe I'd get my mood cards out.
Yeah. I do think this question's interesting with how some people jump on the language barrier. But actually, the pebble analogy or even using the mood cards would be quite a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, the last question is a rapid fire set. And seeing as this is called the Dyslexia Life Hack Show, what is your favourite neurodivergent life hack?
That's a really hard one. What? Flexible working. I'm just thinking of the sort of coverall is got to be flexible working.
It does,
because I see that as a huge barrier for a lot of people.
I think so, particularly as you say with the hyperfocus. If your hyperfocus comes on mid-afternoon to early evening, you have to go work in the morning. It can be a huge barrier.
Yeah, exactly. And just having like a flexibility of environment as well. Like, I could work in an office every day, but I would be more tired because of all the sort of distractions and the lights and the noise and the fact that it's uncomfortable. Like I like to sit cross-legged and move around and fidget and have multiple breaks and stuff. And that's how I get the best out of myself. If I was to work in an office and have to be around people all the time, I do get very tired with being around people. I wouldn't get as much out of myself. Yeah. So like, I know people are like, well, that's not fair. That's preferential treatment. Why can't you? But it's like, what is it that we're trying to achieve? Are we trying to have people reach their maximum potential, or are we just trying to have everyone, be in the same place doing the same thing?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because like, I've got a job where I can hybrid work, and sometimes actually I find it really hard to work from home because I need the noise and the stimulation of the office to get me revved up in the morning.
Yeah, that's up, and I get that. And like sometimes maybe I would want to go into the office once a year, but
once a year. Yeah, see what all the other colleagues look like offside the Zoom.
Yeah. But honestly, like video calls have changed my life. I get so much more done. If I have a day out, I'm like, I have a day to recover. I could do video calls 5 days in a row and get loads done. So, and I'm not advocating for people just staying in their room. I'm advocating for people to get out and get active. But it's all about balance.
As a former sports person, you should still go do some moving around.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that leads me first of all to thank you for coming on the show. And is there anything else you'd like to add, and where can people find you before we sign off? So
they can find me on LinkedIn, Caragh McMurtry. There's also a LinkedIn account for Neurodiverse Sport. Both have Instagram as well. And then there's obviously the website, which is www.neurodiversesport.com, which is in retrospect probably quite hard to spell. But I'm sure you can include it in the description.
I will link it in the show notes as always. But I'm a dyslexic person, and dyslexia is an awkward word to spell. So
that's very true.
Neurodiverse is one I struggle to grapple with. Yeah,
I think the biggest thing that I would say is don't let a label or anybody else define you.
Yes.
And just find the way that you work best. Firstly, understand or try and understand what you want to do, and then find out how you best do it.
Yes.
And be active. Everybody just be active and enjoy sport. And if you are having trouble and facing barriers to activity, then I don't know if I can do anything about it, but I'd love to know about it because I love to learn and I love to advocate. So let me know and I'll try and sort it out.
Yes. So I will link to where you can find her in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. And I want to thank you very much for taking the time this evening to talk to me on this podcast. It's been really, really interesting hearing all the background of sport and your very interesting and sometimes hard journey through it all. So I want to thank you for being so honest and sharing that with us.
Well, thank you. And apologies, it's got so dark in here. It's so creepy. I do look like a hobbit in the corner now.
And I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen. And I will speak to you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.